Hey guys, thanks for joining another episode. Victor Cho here. I am so excited today to be chatting with Dolores Albarracin. She has a crazy good career in terms of the world of psychology, communication. Her current role, she's the Amy Gutman University professor, director of the Communication Science Division of the Annenberg Public Policy Center at the University of Pennsylvania. She's also the director of the Social Action Lab. She has authored multiple books, I think over 150 plus published articles. And the way I think of Dolores is there is nobody that I know of on the planet that is better at having a discussion around technology, communication, and what it means to change attitudes, behaviors, and just what it means to be human. So, Dolores, thank you so much for for carving out some time in what I know is a crazy busy schedule.
Thank you, Victor. Yeah, pleasure to be here. Looking forward to.
Excellent. Well, I'm super excited to have this conversation because as I think about where technology is heading overall, now that's with AI, but even beyond, right? Before that, with the social networks, right? With all the use of these devices, right? The impact on our behaviors and in particular on our communications, right? And what that's doing in terms of changing mindsets, changing behaviors, changing attitudes, I think is one of the most important questions. So I love that you are here helping us learn about that as a society. As a start, could you just describe your current role at UPenn and Annenberg and maybe a little bit more deeply, what drew you into this area of kind of attitudes, communication? Like, how did you get into this field? Define the field really in some ways.
Yeah. Happy to share. As you said, I'm the Amy Gutman Penn Integrates Knowledge Professor. It's a really great honor because we all admire Amy's role at Penn as president for many years. And my role sort of spans several departments, especially psychology and the Annenberg School for Communication, as well as the Annenberg Public Policy Center, which is sort of a big umbrella of several centers. And within that is the Communication Science Division, which I head. So what we're interested in doing is really figuring out what is going on, what are the most important issues to study in the area of communication, both on the basic side, like understanding mechanisms and what allows us to communicate effectively, what's most persuasive, how do we change or not change, because there's a lot of resistance often going on when we're exposed to any information. And also, how do we apply this knowledge to actually change something that matters in the world? So this could be health, it could be the democratic process, of any important outcome that we're concerned with.
Yeah, I know there's been so much conversation, at least over the last, I'd say maybe decade or maybe more, with the social networks of how our past models of creating our schemas and our beliefs is just really undergoing a radical change, right? With all of this technology. I'm just curious, do you see it as a completely different world, or is it overhyped in some ways? Do you think we're making too much of it, or somewhere in between maybe?
I think it's something in between. Like each time there's a new medium, whether it's the printing press, the television set, radio, everybody thinks, well, humans are going to change now. This is performance, and our brains are just not equipped for this, and on and on. And in the end, we typically get a little bit more of old than new.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there are some changes, but they are driven by processes we know very well. So, for instance, one of the issues with any communication and exposure to information is the process that we call selective exposure. So selective exposure means that your attitudes drive the information you seek. So if I'm pro-life, I seek pro-life information. If I'm vegan, I'm of course interested in vegan information. If I'm trying to incorporate a new AI tool, I'm going to be looking for information that supports that decision or goal. And this is a process that we knew well, and it was happening, in the 60s already, way before any of the current media changes arrived. And what we know simply now became even more relevant because with regular broadcasting, yes, there was some degree of selectivity. Now it's all selectivity.
Right.
Now all that we're encountering, we are specifically looking for, and that's sort of the
Yeah,
unique.
is that kind of the encapsulation of the, what do they call it, the thought bubble, or you basically construct this algorithmically driven bubble that just self reinforces what it is that you're looking for, what you believe, which I sort of the reasons I've actually stayed off of social media my whole life. For the most part, I have very limited exposure because I like getting a broader perspective. Actually, I'm curious. Is that, I mean, clearly to me is a trend. If I just see what my kids consume, right, how people are consuming media, is there a measure? Is there like a measure of that? A formal measure of like the span of the breadth of the information you're consuming? Almost, I'm thinking like the Gini coefficient in poverty of like, oh, you're, it's like you're not getting the full picture. That would be kind of an interesting metric if one doesn't exist.
How much, sort of how realistic is your view of the world?
Yeah, and how
Yeah.
narrow it is, right? Like you've got your belief vector here, and you're
I mean,
staying like plus or minus 2 points within it.
yes, I'm not aware of anything like that, but it would be a really good idea. It turns out that even though the social media do create a certain level of bubble, they still, because I mean newspapers and broadcast media are
Yeah,
also involved. They end up also just introducing mainstream information, which
yeah, yeah.
counters the bubble aspect. So it's a little bit of a mixed picture because it always depends on who is in this conversation in a way. Yeah. So if
What's
we're
your,
all in it, it's less restricted and less bubbly. Yeah.
yeah, actually, I would love to hear how you personally consume news and communication. So my mental model has been like I would like to get a balanced and centrist view. So I've gone out and I've looked for traditional, not social media, but traditional editorial bastions that are rated by third parties as being relatively central. And then I will consume those, but not with the algorithmic feed that presents the content, because I know like that's just going to show me something that I think is interesting. I purposefully go deep into each subcategory and go hunt and look for the things that I am finding interesting. But my whole thought process was like, yeah, like it was funny the other day. I was like, oh, all this great AI. Wouldn't it be great to have an AI that like scrubbed the real news and actually came up with what was relevant and served it up to you? I'm like, oh yeah, that's an editor. It's like that's what the world of pre-social journalism was. But yeah, how do you
I mean,
offset?
yeah, I don't follow the needs process you describe. I mean, I start with the New York Times and typically move to the um, Washington Post, and on top of that, I have specialized topics that I care about, and for that, I go to Reddit. So what can I say?
I do find I get sucked into Reddit, but on the weird, I don't know, I'm in their algorithm, or I'm a huge fan of like I love the Marvel Cinematic Universe, like the superheroes, and so I always get these weird posts of like, hey, could Superman beat up Thor? Like, go read about this, and I always click on that, which is horrible. But,
Yes, I mean,
um,
currently there's a lot going on, of course. So I find Reddit quite useful because
yeah,
it's very recent news, and
yes.
there's a lot going on in science. So it's quite interesting.
Well, it's funny. So, uh, in these online businesses which I've run forever, one of the biggest levers of marketing has always been search and search engine optimization, which of course is going through a radical change with AI, right? Because now it's, they call it AI optimization or, artificial intelligence optimization. But like, how do you get into the answer of the AI? And some of the more recent findings I thought was fascinating, which is that Reddit has a disproportionate weight on some of the, at least current AI answers. And so a lot of these marketing firms are telling people, hey, if you want to get into the AI answers, you need to have conversations going on Reddit, which, so you're not alone in terms of that being an interesting locus of content.
Yeah, and it's one of the most content rich platforms, so it makes sense.
Yeah.
Have an impact.
Yeah. So speaking of AI, that's, I think, the question on everyone's mind, right? The impact of these AI, these intelligent systems, these agents on the world of communication. How do you even start to think about that? What are your thoughts, perspectives? That's a big question, I know.
Yes. What changes are we going to see from this? Well, first, the initial reaction is we're all annoyed by having to interact with AI when we weren't planning on. And I think that's going to be probably the first reaction to new AI methods and platforms. What's the level of acceptance? Like if I want to Google something, I don't necessarily want the AI summary. I want to be able to access the answers directly. And that's one aspect. And then, of course, the more we interact with avatars and more specific forms of AI, the question is going to be, how do we communicate, and do we lose our ability to read emotions and
Yeah.
communicate emotions in the way that we normally do? And I think these are going to be generational challenges.
Dolores is an advisor to Amovid, which has been wonderful. She's created so much value for us and given us such great insight. But yeah, this idea of authentic communication and how tuned we are at like the micro expression level to be able to tease out content from folks. That's a fascinating question in a world where you're not seeing that as much because it's being replaced by AI that doesn't do that. Like, do we lose? I hadn't even thought of that one. Do we lose the ability to potentially read expression or kind of have that empathetic vein? That's a great one.
For sure. We are learning constantly. So if you change the medium, lots of things would change. And we're seeing it just merely introducing Zoom, right? Change how we operate. And you see the newer generations of students, I need to tell people in the lab, when you're in a Zoom meeting, you're supposed to still be interacting.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
It's not like people forgot you're there if you're doing something else on your computer. You're out of this conversation. So that alone tells you, well, this could completely change how we communicate. And unless we're getting feedback, the impact could be quite profound.
Yes.
So with respect to AI, it would probably mean that if we can AI ourselves in all kinds of ways, and we're not going to need to learn to communicate effectively, and how we use emotions, intelligence, and all our expressive ability to make a point, to reach out when somebody's in pain, and these kinds of situations.
Yeah. Oh, that's so it's funny. There was a startup that I heard about the other day, and my first thought was like, oh, that might be a positive use case of AI. I'm always trying to bucket when I hear about businesses. I'm like, hey, is this like what's the ethos that's driving this company? And at least at a high level, the thought was, look, there are a lot of kids that are growing up without a lot of adult interaction, and so whether they're in, for whatever reason, they're in an environment where they don't have a lot, and so their thought was like, hey, can we create an artificial avatar that gives them a lot of that connection, right? When in a world where the alternative is they're just sitting by themselves. And my first thought was like, wow, that sounds like a pretty good use, because at this point the avatars can seem to replicate expression, right? Reasonably well, as long as it's not trying to copy you, right? But then that begs an interesting thought, which is like, will they have an entirely different interaction metaphor now in their mind because they're just used, because it's not going to be the same as interacting with a human at the micro expression level.
Right, right. You learn to prompt things correctly, potentially, and that's very different.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just another thought. Something I'm seeing, on the university level specifically is an AI could introduce a lot of insecurity with things that we were relatively secure about. So if you throw in a paragraph that's going to produce 10, 15, essentially an infinite number of edits to it,
Mm-hmm.
how do we know what's right? And I
Yeah.
think this is going to be a central issue. How before we used to trust our gut with a lot of things and
Yeah.
our knowledge and so on. And when do we trust now when there's an infinite number of possibilities?
Yeah.
And the AI answers contradict themselves and so on.
Yeah. I think at the meta level, and I know, you see how the common soundbite is that these large language models have effectively ingested most of the available content that exists. So there's like not a ton more to ingest, and so there's this fascinating question of, but it's going to be really good at generating new content. And now some people are like, well, that's just a regurgitation. I think I disagree with that. Like I've seen these LLMs with the right prompt can create original thought in a way that hasn't been there before if you ask it the right questions. And so now feeding that, if that becomes the new content generation engine, and becomes more and more of it's just like an AI system feeding an AI system. But it could turn out okay if if that new layer of AI generated content has been prompted correctly, right? That is in fact new thought. But if it's just regurgitation, then I think it gets into an interesting place.
Yeah,
The crazy question.
difficult to get it to really produce original content with just scaling. Yeah, we know this, and personally, I'm not super satisfied with the content it generates,
Yeah,
but it can, as we know, improve human content.
yeah,
Right. That synergy could
yeah.
be, I mean, it is actually spectacular and it accelerates lots of things.
Yeah. So I was just yesterday. One of the things I love to do is I try to spend like an hour interacting with the AI just to push its limits, right? Understand what it can do, kind of see. And I learn a ton. Like I actually find that in some ways more beneficial than reading.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah.
But the other day I was super impressed. So I asked it this. So I had first. There was an article that I heard, and it talked about the social sciences, and I was like, I can't define social sciences, so I started that. All right, I started asking can you define social sciences, and it gave me a great answer, and then I was like, how does that fit against the other sciences? And so it actually gave me a really good taxonomy of like, hey, here's all of this, here's the entire spectrum of education, right? How it's clustered. That I expected it to do. What I was impressed with though is I said, hey, sounds like this is imperfect, right? These aren't orthogonal categories. There's lots of overlap, and like CS doesn't quite fit. I'm like, if you could invent a new taxonomy for all of the educational disciplines in the world, more independent, could you come up with one? And I thought it would fail miserably at that, and it came up with a really good one. And I was like, wow, I don't think anyone's ever written about that. And maybe somebody has, but I do think that was original thought, right? That could have come out of a PhD student or a professor. But yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
very much.
Well, I love to see it. It can classify and it can teach you very quickly.
Yeah, yeah,
Whereas before we would order all these books on new methods and so on. We don't need to do
yeah,
much of that. We can accelerate learning quite a bit for
yeah.
sure. But it's fast for
It is.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah. I'm yet to see any new knowledge coming out of it. Like if you ask, come up with an interesting hypothesis in this area.
yeah,
It's,
yeah, yeah. It can.
thanks.
That makes sense. It can
It's
probably
not.
synthesize existing, not ideate on new. Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, actually, I'm curious because you've seen, so many students come through. Do you see a difference in students' ability in terms of either their critical thinking or their ability to synthesize because of, over the last, 10, 15 years, or are students basically the same and now they're figuring out this new tool, or do you see any kind of fundamental slow change or
I,
fast change even?
yeah, great question. What we're all seeing, I mean, probably, yeah, 15 years of reading a lot less. So students stop reading the textbook, and that dramatically decreased the value of it and education, right? So that was coming. Now I think they are probably a lot more insecure about their capacity to synthesize information for these reasons. But at the same time, they can improve more quickly
Yeah.
on writing or structure. So I guess it all depends on how you're using AI.
Oh,
Is this a good use? And that's where we're heading, yeah, with students. Not don't use it, but if you submit this kind of GPT prose, it might look fluent, but it's actually awful for a scientific audience, and it's not going to succeed. But can you improve some little things while keeping, your substance in there? Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's yeah. To me, it's one of the most exciting slash scary slash interesting times that we've gone through, maybe ever. Um, here's a question that maybe for me, maybe the question of the ages, which is in a world where these AI systems are getting more and more sophisticated, where it's basically impossible to tell what communication is AI versus not. Like to me, something that's super important is this idea of human connection and trust. Like, how do you trust in a world where you don't know whether the communication is real or not? I would love your thoughts on that one, just selfishly for what we're doing here at Movid.
Yes. No, I mean, a lot of the work on trust shows that trust is quite implicit. So you see somebody and hear a couple of sentences, and that's already building trust.
Mm-hmm.
So the ability to preserve those human signals, I think it's also very important
Mm-hmm.
to maintain, a natural form in which trust emerges.
Yeah.
So besides openness and transparency are going to be critical. So if I'm communicating with you, I want to know, am I seeing Victor or who am I seeing? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's possibly one solution. Yeah. We can integrate AI, but how much disclosure do we have?
Yeah.
And that's probably where we're headed. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know about you, but I am clearly seeing a barrage of more and more AI generated communication. Like I get, because I'm running a business, right? I get barraged by all these firms trying to build a connection. And I'm seeing the quality of that reach out. It used to be actually quite personal and it was obvious, like, oh, you did some research. And now I'm just seeing this horrible AI generated slop of like, hey, Victor, we should talk because you did this and you did this. And I'm like, this has nothing to do, like, who, that makes no sense. Um, do you see that at all in your world or?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're seeing a lot on social media and everywhere, and yeah, it's frustrating, yeah, because we feel somewhat taken advantage of. I guess when trust is violated and
Yeah.
we no longer know with whom we're communicating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I hope we can help. Well, we'll be able to hopefully make a dent in that with what we're doing over at Amovid. Hey, there's so much change in AI, so many tools. How do you stay ahead, abreast, or just try to keep up? Do you have any tips or,
I'm not looking for, I mean, pretty much we're sticking to basic things like LLMs and
yeah.
some of the old NLP, natural language processing tools in our work. So we're not looking for very specific AI-based technology, and I think that's likely to fail, like selling products for each task. Yeah,
Yeah.
AI for your resume, an AI for memos and so on. It's too now scattered in a way, and we don't need it. So the way I look at this, we need some good basic tools that can do many things, whether it's communicating or improving some aspects of data analysis. It's amazing for that, for sure. That's when we're that's the main benefit for academics, I think, and some on the writing side. And once you have these broad stroke processes in place through technology, I think we can incorporate those. But I'm personally not interested in something that's very specific
Hmm.
because I don't think we need that.
Yeah. No, that makes a ton of sense. Yeah, I'm blown away at the breadth of what the LLMs can do. Right. It
Right.
is it is clearly a signal that we have untapped the path to higher level, right, reasoning and thinking. It's quite remarkable. Awesome, Dolores. Well, thank you so much for carving out a half hour to share thoughts and perspectives. I so appreciate the time and hope the audience has enjoyed the conversation. Um, two other quick bits of thanks. Anurag, our producer, for getting this set up, and Largent Media and C-Suite for also helping us with promotion, and a little plug to my daughter, Izzy, who did the music for the podcast. So it's so fun, which you can't hear right now, but you'll hear in the final one. Always great seeing you.
Take care.
In addition to running this podcast, I'm also the CEO of Emovid. In business today, it's impossible for anyone to tell what digital communication is real versus AI generated or modified. This is a huge issue that we have actually solved at Emovid. Emovid is the only guaranteed authentic asynchronous communication platform that has been built for business. If your business relies upon relationship and trust building, this is a must-have platform for you and your teams. Please check out emovid.com at emovid.com, or even better, if you can see it, scan the QR code and you'll get to see the product in action and even get a special podcast offer. Thank you again for listening.